They said it didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. That's what the letter said, printed neatly on HOA letterhead, like it wasn't talking about a little girl's right to enter her own home. It wasn't graffiti. It wasn't a broken fence or overgrown grass. It was a wheelchair ramp, a simple wooden ramp built for my 10-year-old daughter. The same girl who, a year ago, could run barefoot through sprinklers and chase lightning bugs across our yard, until one night a drunk driver ran a red light and stole that part of her life forever. Now every step we take as a family feels heavier. Every door, every stair, every curb reminds us of what's changed. So when I built that ramp, it wasn't decoration, it was dignity. But to the HOA, it was non-compliant. To them, compassion was clutter. The fines started slow, then piled up. Threats of liens, removal orders, and warnings about community uniformity. They said I was making the neighborhood look bad, but what looked bad was watching grown adults punish a child for needing help. So I stopped trying to reason with them. I stopped begging for permission to be human, because I realized something they never would. Some rules are meant to be broken, and when the day came to face them in court, I didn't just walk in as a homeowner, I walked in as a father who refused to let his little girl be treated like a violation. Before all this began, life in Oak Hollow Estates was quiet. The kind of suburb where sprinklers hissed in perfect rhythm. Lawns were greener than reason, and neighbors waved like they practiced for it. Our home sat at the end of a tree-lined cul-de-sac. We'd bought it 10 years ago, back when the only thing louder than the cicadas in summer was the laughter of our daughter. Emma was light itself. She filled rooms with it. Curious, creative, stubborn in all the best ways. The kind of kid who painted the world with sidewalk chalk and called it art. That summer, we'd been saving for her first trip to the ocean. She'd been counting the days on a calendar taped to her bedroom wall. But life doesn't always care about calendars. One night, coming home from her best friend's birthday party, a drunk driver ran a red light at 60 miles an hour. Our car spun, metal screamed, glass shattered, and in a second, everything changed. When I woke in the hospital, I heard machines beeping and my wife, Karen, whispering through tears. And when I saw Emma, the bruises were temporary. The wheelchair wasn't. The doctor said she'd never walk again. I didn't believe them at first, because parents never want to. But as the months passed, reality sank in. So we adapted. We remodeled the downstairs, turned the dining room into Emma's bedroom, sold the trampoline, and bought therapy equipment instead. Every day became a fight to give her independence back. And slowly we started to smile again. The ramp was the last step. It was simple. A small, safe incline built from smooth cedar, painted the same soft gray as the porch I built it myself over a weekend, measuring every angle, every inch. When I was done, Emma rolled down it on her own for the first time. Her face lit up like the sun, Karen cried. And for a moment, it felt like hope had come home again. The neighbors seemed to agree. They brought cookies, cards, and casseroles. Even old Mr. Geller across the street, who'd complained about everything from leaf blowers to Halloween decorations, said, "Good job, Mike. Looks real nice." For a while, it felt like community meant something, until the letter came. It arrived 2 weeks later. A white envelope stamped with Oak Hollow Homeowners Association. At first, I thought it was a friendly note, maybe something about summer maintenance or the pool reopening. But when I unfolded it, my heart sank. Notice of non-compliance, unauthorized exterior modification, wheelchair ramp installation violates community design guidelines. Immediate removal required. I laughed at first, because it was so absurd I even called the number at the bottom, expecting a reasonable conversation. That's how I met Deborah Klein, the HOA president. Her voice was polite, precise, and as cold as polished marble. "Mr. Hayes, we understand your situation, but uniformity keeps property values stable. You must submit a request for review." "I did," I said. "You never responded." "We'll look into it," she replied. "But until then, the ramp must be removed." I hung up thinking reason would prevail, but 2 days later, another envelope arrived, this time in bold red ink. "Fine. $100 per day until compliance." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rules, it was about control. And I wasn't about to let control take away my daughter's doorway. The first week, I ignored the fine. I thought common sense would win out, that maybe someone on the board would see how ridiculous this was. But common sense doesn't live in HOA boardrooms. By the second week, the fines doubled. By the third, we got a final warning threatening a lien on our home. I called again. Deborah Klein answered, sounding like she'd been waiting for me. Mr. Hayes, the rules are clear. You didn't request approval for an exterior modification. I told her the ramp was built for accessibility, not decoration. Then you should have submitted medical documentation. Her tone made it sound like my daughter's wheelchair was an excuse. That night, Karen found me sitting in the garage staring at the workbench where I'd built the ramp. She asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I felt helpless, humiliated, like I was being punished for being a good father. The next day, I saw them. 2 HOA inspectors, clipboards, polo shirts, sunglasses, walking up my driveway. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They just took photos. I stepped outside. Can I help you? They ignored me. One muttered, we need angles for documentation. Emma was watching through the window, her small face pressed against the glass. That was the moment something in me broke. I called Deborah again, voice shaking. You're harassing my family. We're enforcing regulations, Mr. Hayes. You're photographing my child's bedroom window. A pause. If you feel uncomfortable, you're welcome to attend the next board meeting. And that's exactly what I did. The board met in the community clubhouse, a space that smelled like old carpet and fresh arrogance. 15 folding chairs lined up in neat rows, a long table up front, and a banner reading Oak Hollow HOA, preserving our neighborhood standards. I stood when my name was called. The moment I mentioned my daughter, a few faces softened, but Deborah's didn't. We sympathize with your situation, she began, but the community must maintain its appearance. Wheelchair ramps must be pre-approved, constructed with approved materials, and screened from view. Screened from view. Like shame, like disability needed to be hidden. I took a deep breath. You're not talking about a ramp. You're talking about my daughter's independence. Some neighbors nodded. Others looked down. Deborah scribbled something on her notepad. Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Hayes, she said. So does compassion, I replied. The motion passed, 4-1 against me. That night I came home to find another letter taped to my door. Ramp removal deadline extended to 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in forced removal. I read it twice. Then I tore it in half. Days passed. Every morning I checked the mailbox, half afraid of what was next. The fines climbed past $2,000. They started sending copies to my mortgage lender. Threatening escalation, Karen begged me to stop fighting. Mike, it's killing you, she said softly. Maybe we can rebuild it in the back. But the ramp was already at the back. It wasn't visible from the road. They just wanted to make an example of us. And I couldn't let that happen. Not to Emma, not to anyone else who needed help. Then one morning I stepped outside to find a neon orange notice of enforcement nailed to my porch post. It said, construction crew scheduled for removal. Tuesday, 9 a.m. They were coming to tear down the ramp. Emma saw the notice. Her eyes filled instantly. Daddy, I didn't do anything wrong, right? I knelt beside her wheelchair, hands trembling as I tried to smile. Of course not, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong. But I was shaking because I knew they were wrong. That night, I sat at my desk until 2 a.m., researching, reading, learning the law, and that's when I found it. The Fair Housing Act, Section 804F3A, making it unlawful to deny reasonable modifications for people with disabilities. They weren't just bullying us. They were breaking federal law. The next morning, I called a disability rights group. They connected me to David Morales, an attorney known for taking on cases like this and winning. When I told him what happened, he didn't sound surprised. You'd be shocked how many HOAs pull this garbage, he said. They think bylaws outrank human decency. He asked for the letters, the photos, the board minutes, everything. By the time I finished emailing him the files, his response was one line. This is airtight. They're finished. 2 days later, David filed suit in federal court. Hayes versus Oak Hollow Homeowners Association. Word spread fast. Half the neighborhood pretended not to notice. The other half started whispering, Some said I was reckless. Some said I was brave. And some, quietly, started calling me asking for copies of my lawyer's info because they'd been fined too. The HOA tried intimidation. They sent out flyers claiming false accusations. They posted an email saying I was endangering property values. But by then, the momentum had shifted. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's who'd ever been told to be quiet and just follow the rules. And when the court date came, it wasn't fear I felt walking into that courthouse. It was purpose because they had tried to make my daughter invisible. And we were about to show them that her story, our story, was bigger than their entire rulebook. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and lemon polish, old wood and older grudges. Rows of benches creaked as neighbors filled them, whispering like it was Sunday service. Even a few HOA board members showed up, dressed sharp, smug, and whispering behind their binders. At the front sat Judge Ramirez, mid-60s, calm but firm, the kind of man who didn't waste time. He shuffled through the files, sighed, and said, "All right, let's get this circus started." David Morales, my attorney, leaned in and whispered, "You're about to watch arrogance eat itself alive." Deborah Klein sat 3 rows ahead, adjusting her pearl necklace like she was preparing for a magazine shoot. When our eyes met, she smiled, the kind of smile that hides behind policy and power. The bailiff called, "Case number 22-1948, Hayes versus Oak Hollow Homeowners Association." David stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and started with calm precision. "Your Honor, this case isn't complicated. The defendant, the Oak Hollow HOA, fined my client, Mr. Hayes, for building a wheelchair ramp for his disabled daughter. They claimed it violated design standards. What they violated was the law, specifically the Fair Housing Act, which clearly protects the right to reasonable accessibility modifications." He paused, letting it sink in. This isn't about property values, it's about human values. Deborah's attorney, a young man with slicked hair and too much confidence, stood next. "Your Honor, the HOA acted within its bylaws. Mr. Hayes made an unapproved modification." Judge Ramirez raised a hand. "A modification for his disabled child? Well, technically, yes, but then technically," the judge cut in, "this better be good." The courtroom laughed softly. Deborah's attorney flushed red. David walked toward the projector screen they'd set up. He pulled up the HOA's own photos, images of the ramp they'd taken without permission. "Your Honor, here's the so-called unsightly construction the HOA deemed a threat to community appearance." On screen, the ramp glowed in sunlight. Smooth wood, clean paint, flower pots along the edges. You could see Emma's artwork in the background, her hand-painted butterflies decorating the rail. The judge leaned forward. "This is what they fined you for?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, for giving my daughter the ability to get to her school bus on her own." You could feel the air shift. Even Deborah looked uneasy now, her once perfect posture stiffening. David clicked again. Now came the HOA's letters, the fines, the threats, the screen from view clause. "And here," David said, "is the moment they crossed from unreasonable to unlawful." He read the section from the Fair Housing Act aloud. The room was silent. No shuffle, no cough, no whisper. When he finished, he turned to Deborah. "Ms. Klein, did the HOA review or acknowledge the Fair Housing Act before issuing these fines?" Her attorney jumped in. "Objection, Your Honor. That's irrelevant." "Overruled," Judge Ramirez said. "Answer the question, Ms. Klein." Deborah cleared her throat. "We assumed Mr. Hayes was aware of the guidelines." "Guidelines?" David said, eyebrows raised. "The ones that make it illegal to discriminate against disabled residents?" The judge's gavel cracked once. "I've heard enough." He turned to Deborah directly. "Ms. Klein, your HOA embarrassed this family, fined them illegally, and violated federal accessibility law. You've wasted this court's time. You will issue a formal apology, rescind all fines, and cover all of Mr. Hayes' legal fees." Then his gaze softened slightly as he looked at me. "Mr. Hayes, thank you for reminding this community what decency looks like." He tapped the gavel again. "Case closed." But that wasn't the real ending. As the crowd shuffled out, Deborah stopped near the door. For the first time, she didn't have that perfect composure. She looked at me, then at the reporters gathering outside. You could have just filed a request, she muttered. And you could have just shown compassion, I said quietly. Outside, the sun hit the courthouse steps like a spotlight. Neighbors who'd watched from the benches clapped softly as I helped Emma's wheelchair down the ramp. Reporters shouted questions, but all I could hear was her giggle when the wheels rolled freely onto the sidewalk. It was the first time in a long time she'd smiled like that, and that alone made every sleepless night worth it. After the ruling, the neighborhood felt different, not quieter, not louder, just awake. People who once turned their heads away now stopped to wave, to say, good for you, or about time someone stood up to them. But it wasn't about attention, it was about change. Within weeks, the HOA board resigned one by one. New elections were held, and this time compassion, not control, made it onto the ballot. The new board sent a letter, but not one of threats or fines. It read simply, "We're sorry, and thank you for reminding us what community is supposed to mean." I taped that letter next to Emma's artwork on the fridge. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even the smallest act of courage can make something shift. The ramp still stood, stronger than ever. We stained it a rich honey color that caught the morning light. Emma helped me paint small blue flowers along the edge. Her idea. When it dried, she rolled to the top, looked at me and said, "It feels like flying, Dad." And in a way it did, because it wasn't just a ramp anymore. It was freedom. It was defiance wrapped in love. It was proof that when the world tells you to sit down, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand your ground. Even if standing looks a little different now. Neighbors started building ramps of their own, for aging parents, for visiting relatives, even just as a sign of solidarity. A movement grew quietly across our little street, and that's when I realized we didn't just win a case. We reclaimed what community really means. Rules can guide us, but without empathy, they're just chains pretending to be order. So when the next storm comes, and it always does, I hope people remember this, that compassion doesn't lower property values. It raises humanity. And sometimes the strongest foundations aren't made of concrete or wood. They're made of kindness.